Hey, future CRNA, Jenny Fennell here, CRNA and founder of CRNA School Prep Academy. Welcome back to another episode of CRNA School Prep Academy. Today we are going to get into how to write a good personal statement for CRNA School. So first, why do they have you write a personal statement? What's the purpose behind writing a personal statement? So as you may know, your interview is only one piece of the puzzle, and sometimes it's only 10 minutes long, maybe 15, 20 minutes. Some schools, I think I've heard of a half hour, 45 minutes, but the vast majority of schools only spend a short period of time actually interviewing you, and they use your personal statement as another way to gauge your personality as well as your writing style. So your personal statement, again, is for them to assess who you are as a person, get to know you, assess your goals, maybe your educational background, your work ethic, and your writing style. Now remember, you're entering into a doctoral degree. There's going to be a lot of graduate level writing involved in getting your doctoral degree. So again, they want to really assess your writing skills. They want to assess your word choices, whether it's unprofessional or maybe you're more of a conversational writer, which is definitely the problem that I have when I write. It's more like I write like I'm actually talking to you in person versus writing. So being aware of where maybe you're lacking and addressing these areas prior to starting on your personal statement. And we'll kind of get into how you can do this and some resources for you to utilize to make sure that you're really looking over your writing prior to submitting that personal statement. So again, and some of the things to point out as far as looking at your writing style, they will think, well, is this student going to need a lot of guidance and a lot of help to get them up to speed to be able to succeed at writing this paper? And let's just say they have two candidates who relatively are about the same and interviewed and scored about the same. While one of them has a good personal statement, the other one is kind of just mediocre. They may lean to the student who had a better personal statement, knowing they're going to need less help and less guidance to actually do all the doctoral writing involved in the program. So I'm not trying to unencourage you if writing is not your strong suit. Just know that you need to make sure you make your personal statement strong. And then when you're in school, you're going to have to rely on additional resources to make sure you're getting extra help and proofreading where you need it. So it doesn't mean you can't do it. It just means that you're going to need some extra help, and you need to identify that prior to submitting your personal statement. And just to also point out too, we've had students who English is their second language, and they've needed 3, 4, 5 edits on their personal statement, and they still get into school. And yes, may they require some additional help during all their writing? Sure, but now they know they can get assistance. They can get someone to proofread their papers for them and help them where it's necessary. So I don't want to make you feel like this is not possible if English is not your strong suit. You can do this. You just, again, have to be aware of the possible help you're going to need along the way to accomplish the goal. Okay, so that's been addressed. So let's kind of get into, the structure and maybe some red flags that I want to point out. So students sometimes, to make themselves sound like they're good writers, sometimes what they do is they inflate their verbiage, meaning they use these big vocabulary words, and they think the more big words they use, the more, or maybe it'll make them sound smarter, right? But the problem is, if you don't truly understand the word, not only is it going to become difficult to read quickly, and let me also remind you that these programs are getting 150, 200 applicants or more sometimes. And so they have a lot of essays to read. And so if it's difficult to read, you're automatically going to trigger something in their brain that's going to say, oh, it's just, I can't, I need to be able to read this efficiently and quickly. And they're using so many fancy words that I have to slow down and really ask myself, what do they mean by that? And the reason why I want to bring that up is because, again, not that you want to not be aware of the word choices you're using and use language that, again, aids in your descriptions, but just be cognizant of the flow of that and how difficult it is for someone to read quickly and get the gist of what you're trying to say. Richard Wilson, who does guided Q&As inside the Academy, pointed out that sometimes it's not really about the word definition matches, but it might be used out of context a little bit. So again, you may have to be aware that even though the word definition fits to what you're trying to describe, maybe it's not used in the best context or the best flow for the sentence. So also want to point out that you need to proofread. It looks, kind of sloppy if you make pretty basic grammar errors in your essay, it just kind of shows them that you didn't really take the time to do your due diligence essentially to proofread the paper prior to submitting it. So, you really need to, if that means getting help to do that, read it over when your eyes are not fatigued. I know me, sometimes I read something and I like put letters where I think they should go in my brain, but I didn't actually write that down. So especially when I'm fatigued, I tend to do that more frequently. I miss little tiny errors that I've made. If you haven't used something called Grammarly, I highly recommend you do that. But that isn't everything. There is a free version of it, and while it's amazing, it definitely, unless you pay for it, you can only get so much out of it. But it shouldn't replace a good proofread, but it's definitely a good place to start. And again, it's called Grammarly. You can install it on Google Chrome. So definitely make sure you're doing that for like your first proofread, for example. Also, I've noticed too, like when you take documents and put it into like a Word doc, Google Doc or whatnot, again, it'll do some proofreading for you, but it actually can flip words that you may not even catch because maybe your spelling was off a little bit and it'll pick a word that's similar, but maybe it's so similar that you didn't catch it. You have to be really careful about that too. So you think you're correcting a misspelling, but in reality, you're completely changing the word altogether. But maybe your brain doesn't recognize that right away because it's so similar to the word that you wanted to say. So you have to be really, really careful because don't rely on spell check and Grammarly to do everything for you. You really still need to put second eyes on that paper, walk away, come back, that type of thing. So yes, you need to proofread. And I actually want to take this moment to also share with you guys a story from one of our students, because another thing that can happen too is when you're writing multiple personal statements, sometimes you may make the mistake and leave in the wrong school name, for example. Maybe you express how you would be a good candidate for school X and you submit that personal statement for school Y, and even though it was relatively the same prompt and you updated the prompt to kind of match, you left in the wrong school name. That happens, and probably more often than I would even probably realize it probably happens. It's really easy to do. So let me kind of just share with you guys this because, again, this is from one of our students. I thought it was a great takeaway. All right. Hey, Jenny and CSBA family. I just want to take time out to thank everybody who was a part of this community. This is my testimony to the effectiveness of the program. Back in June of 2021, Richard helped me write a very concise and thoughtful letter of intent. This letter, along with my decent stats, got me interviews at 2 out of 3 schools. I used the content in CSBA library and the resources on the site to prepare for my interviews. I was offered a seat on the spot during my first interview. The second program also offered me a seat 2 weeks after my interview. I want to pause here and mention the importance of being honest, prepared, and not let your mistakes define you. I sent my letter of intent with another school name on it to the program that offered me a seat on the spot. Many people told me to forget about ever getting into that program. Instead of giving up, I wrote a letter to the director of the program explaining my mistake and showing her I take responsibility for my actions. Oops, I lost it. She later told me in the interview that my honesty and willingness to take responsibility for my actions without making excuses is why she wants me in her program. I owe my acceptance to this community. During my second interview, I was able to interpret graphs that I saw in one of Richard's presentations. The interviewer told me I was the only one who was able to correctly interpret the data out of so many applicants. So thank you, Jenny, Richard, and everyone in this community. I look forward to using CSBA resources and Crush CRNA School. So first, I love that because, again, I just love everything about it. But the takeaway from this for you today is the fact that this student had to own his mistake, and he did this. He put the wrong school on his personal statement and sent it. He still got offered a spot on the spot during his CRNA interview, which is amazing. Now, a couple takeaways from this. One, he owned his mistake. There are probably plenty of students who make this mistake who are fearful. And like he said, plenty of people told him just to walk away, to give up on that school. It's not going to happen. He made a mistake and he's got to live with it, right? But instead, he was like, I don't want it to end that way. I have to at least let them know that I'm aware that I made the mistake. And that's what these schools really want. They want a student who has a voice to say, hey, I messed up. I'm sorry. That's so important as far as your attitude. And again, that's what they're looking for in a candidate. So it's not all about your ICU background, your 4.0 GPA, etc. They really want to see that personality characteristic that you're going to take ownership for when you make mistakes. But I also love the fact that he was very well prepared for his interviews, and that also clearly displayed in his interview, skills. So not only did he fess up and take ownership for his mistake, but he adequately, I should say, prepared for his interview. So I wanted to share that with you because I thought it was really touching, and also because if I'm speaking to you, mistakes happen. I also have shared a story of mine that originally when I reached out to one of my programs I applied to, I was trying to see how I could stand out as an applicant, trying to see how I could be more competitive, that kind of thing. So I interviewed the program director and addressed him informally, meaning that instead of saying, "Dear Mr. So-and-so," I said, "Dear Charles," or "Dear," and that set him off. And he was very upset at how dare you address me so informally, and asked me to write a letter on how rude Generation X was, and or Generation Y, whatever you want to call me these days. So I had to do some research on, millennials and Generation X, that kind of thing, and write him this long explanation as far as how I am working towards being more respectful, right? And so I did that. It was like a 5-page paper, and it actually ended up working in my favor because he was really impressed with my writing and really enjoyed the fact that I took the time to be that thorough in my research. And it worked out. I got into the program. Now, I don't know, that was about a year's time, and then I applied a year later. So who knows? I'll be honest with you, during the interview, it never got brought up, and it wasn't like I was going to point it out. But at the same token, I was like, well, if they ask about it, I'm going to own it and talk to them about it, because I clearly fessed up, wrote the paper, apologized, and we ended up being on good terms via email after that experience. But it was one of those things where, you can't just hold it inside and hope that no one notices. If you make a mistake, whether that's in your essay, reaching out, in clinical, you have to speak up. That is the only way you can address it, learn from it, and move on. So don't let that scare you. But I also want to be really just be careful and check to make sure. And if it does happen to you, there is still light at the end of the tunnel. Okay. So let's kind of get into how they assess your personality and how you interact with others. So essentially, whatever you place in this essay is going to be considered important by you, right? You wouldn't put it in there if you didn't find it important. So it's important to include information about you as well as your accomplishments. You want to highlight things that you have done, awards that you have won, committees you have been a part of, any research you have done, things like that. So again, they can kind of get a taste. It's kind of, think about it. Don't just regurgitate your resume. I think some students make this mistake where they get kind of listy in their personal statement. It becomes kind of looks like a new fancy resume. You got to be careful you don't do that. But you also want to, if you did something that's really special that maybe you want to highlight from your resume, then for sure, talk about it. But just know that you don't need to put everything from your resume there. But anything that's really unique or stands out, definitely mention it. There are so many times where I had a candidate or students who got in who maybe the first time they applied, I look at their resume. This is kind of not on point to the essay, but the resume, and I kind of can't gather the information that I can get when I talk to them. And I'm like, man, you've done all this amazing stuff, but yet your resume doesn't even highlight it. I don't even understand what this award is or what it means, but now you explained this to me. I wish I would have known that. And so same thing with your resume. You need to be going into enough detail to where they know what that award means, what these certifications are, et cetera, but use your essay to really highlight that as well. Because again, there's a lot of things that people may just assume that someone's going to understand or know, but don't ever assume that someone's going to know. You have to explain and highlight what you've accomplished. So again, you want to go into, the fact that you've been on this path for a while. Why do you want to do it? And again, let's just kind of give you guys some examples of prompts, right? So a prompt could be to share with me in a, 500 word or less essay, your short-term and long-term professional goals. Or they could just say, describe your personal strengths and weaknesses that you see to be important in completing this educational program. And maybe they don't give you a page length. Maybe they just give you, that prompt and but do you want to write a 5-page paper? I mean, ideally you probably, most programs are going to give you a length, some maybe it's 2 pages, but you want to still make sure, even if you have all this stuff to share, that you're being succinct and concise and brief and to the point. Allow a lot of the details to happen when they actually interview, if they want to ask you questions around your personal statement. And I also want to get into, like, what if you have something that, you feel is a shortcoming, and addressing it. I've had a lot of students also tell me they've had a lot of success by being upfront, and I call it addressing the elephant in the room, by kind of addressing a shortcoming. And the reason why that could be so powerful is because they're going to look at your resume and they're going to already be asking the question, well, they were such a bad student in the beginning, and now, they have a recent A in stats, but how do I know that they're a serious student now? Well, address it briefly in your essay, and then allow them to ask you more questions in the interview, and even bring it up. I know you probably saw this, in my resume, and I know I try to describe it briefly in my statement. But I'm, and then kind of address it. They may even ask you, tell me why you think you're a good student now, when clearly, historically, you haven't been. And be ready to answer those hard questions, and not in a way that just because a lot of people have had traumatic things happen to them. There's tons of stories that you can tell them, but you really have to focus less on how you're moving forward from it, what you have done to grow from it. And otherwise, and again, Richard has said this before too, it depends on what mood he's in when he reads an essay. He could get an essay that just goes into all these details, and it could just seem like they're just giving excuses as to why X, Y, and Z happened, versus a brief, concise, okay, this X, Y, and Z, and now this, so, okay, cool. He's admitting to this flaw, or she's admitting to this flaw, and this is what they've done to overcome that. Cool. Versus tons of details of X, Y, Z, that this caused this and this caused that kind of thing. Make sure you're not taking up your entire personal statement by just addressing one issue, and because you might miss out on other things you could highlight about yourself, and not just focus in on the negative, right? So yeah, keep in mind, you're getting this shot to kind of give the interview panel an overall picture of you. And if you have a shortcoming, that's just one part of who you are. That's not everything. And they're understanding. They know a lot of students maybe didn't have clear focus early on in this career path and didn't think they were going to go back to grad school. That's a really common thing that people hear about pursuing CRNA. Oh, I thought nursing was it for me. I didn't plan on going back to school, so I was okay with C's. But okay, that happened. You weren't as you didn't have direction. You didn't have, a passion for CRNA, but once you discovered it, now you have found, your passion and your direction. So now you're being able to persevere through overcoming what you did when you were younger and didn't have as much, direction on your career path, by taking graduate courses, joining committee works, by doing research, by working at a level, really great ICU, and explaining what you have done to make yourself candidate that they will want in their program. So that's what I mean. So yeah, give them a little taste of maybe some of your shortcomings without going into so much detail that you're taking over your entire paper to do so. Because you want to make sure you're still highlighting the good things too. You don't want the whole paper to be about things that maybe are more negative. So just keep that in mind when you're highlighting your shortcomings, and just really focus on where you're going with it versus what has already happened. That's probably my biggest piece of advice. So another thing too, I want to make sure that I touch on this too, is that you guys are giving yourself enough time to edit your paper, and think about what you want to write. Sometimes it takes a while, and it takes you to take a break and come back to it to really gather your thoughts. You think about it. You write a paper. Okay, you write it and okay, I got to go back and tweak it 4 or 5 more times. And then maybe even if you let some time pass, like a few days or so, and come back again, you're like, oh, well. And the thing is, what you do every time you do that is you kind of stop and gather some insights around what you want to express and tell them. And maybe within a few days or 3-4 days, new insights come to you. They're like, oh, I really should mention that. And now the reason behind that totally clicks. And now I can see how I can fit into their program based on their mission statement, things like that. I know how I what my professional goals look like that are also in line with the school's mission. And you should know the mission statement. I probably should have started with that, is when you're looking how to start writing your personal statement, you should really know your school and what they pride themselves on, what's in their mission statement, what's important to them. And you can also do this by going to their program open houses, asking questions, talking to current students. Do your due diligence and really research your school to make sure you're personalizing your personal statement to that program, which is also why even if you're applying to 3 to 4 different schools, you have to then tailor, even if it's the same prompt, you have to still tailor your essay to that school. I'm not saying you have to write a completely new essay, but make sure you're answering the prompt. You don't want to just, because let's just say you wrote a really good personal statement for your number one choice school, right? And then you're applying to 2 other schools as backup. I mean, maybe that's what you're doing. But maybe your 2 other schools have different prompts where you're like, wow, this essay is really good. And I know I made it really great for this school. So I'm sure it's going to be fine for that school. And so you just submit it. But then they get it and they're like, well, yeah, it's a good essay, but you didn't follow directions. You didn't answer my prompt. So immediately they're disqualifying you from following direction. So don't do that to yourself. Take the time to tailor it to what the school's asking. Because again, it's like, why even bother applying if they're going to discredit you from the beginning that you can't follow direction? And you may be a good writer and you may have a lot of good things to say, but because you think what you did is good enough for them too, it may not be. They're still going to want you to follow direction. It says to them like, oh, you don't care enough to rewrite and answer what we're asking you to write. I mean, they're going to not feel like they're your top choice school if that's the way you're treating it. So, and if it really is a school that you want to potentially get into, if you don't get into your top school, you have to treat it like a school you want to get into, which means you got to give it your all out effort, right? So just keep that in mind. I know it's more work, but that also leads me to, you got to plan for this. You got to plan ahead. Do not write your personal statement the week your application is due. And I know I've preached this before, but a lot of schools give preference for students who submit their application early. So you should be probably starting your admission statement at least 3 to 4 months out at minimum, especially if you have more than one to do, because you could take a couple months to really tailor that essay and get feedback. Inside the academy, we have essay critiques that you can book one-on-one. You can either do a 1 essay edit or a 2 essay edit. So again, take advantage of these resources if you feel like you need it. As I said earlier, we have students whose English is their second language. And so they struggle writing, and they've utilized our essay critiques in the academy 3, 4, 5 times, and they have an awesome essay and they gain acceptance. Now they're still going to have to make sure that in school, when they are doing all their writing, that they seek out resources if they're struggling writing their papers. But the thought process behind what you want to say is there. It's just a matter of critiquing it to get it to read nicely, right? Because you have it within you to write. Sometimes it just takes some extra effort and tweaking to make sure you're conveying what you want to say to the reader. And just as another really great resource that's free that I always recommend students to utilize, and I also know program directors frequently tell their students to do this course prior to starting the program. It's a free writing course. It's through Coursera. I think I'm pronouncing that right. Coursera. Maybe it's Coursera. But either way, it's Writing in the Sciences. So if you just Google Writing in the Sciences and then Stanford, because it's through a professor from Stanford, you will find it. But I believe the platform they use is like Coursera.org or something like that. So again, it's called Writing in the Sciences. Definitely check it out. Whether you've already gained acceptance or whether you're still trying to prepare for your personal statement, it's a great place to start because it kind of just goes over some basic writing style tips and for you to take with you. So definitely do that and utilize an essay critique in the academy. So I hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and I hope, writing the personal statement, just take a deep breath and start it sooner than later, especially if it's something you're really worried about. Make sure you're having multiple eyeballs take a look at your paper, whether that's your dad, your sister, your friend, your peer, your coworker, getting an essay critique inside the academy. Make sure you're doing all those things to give yourself the best chance. Also, one thing we just did that is really cool inside the academy is we did a live essay edit. We had a volunteer of ours, a student of ours, submit an essay for a live critique, for which Richard Wilson, who is our expert contributor and assistant program director, critiqued the essay live. And so you could watch what his thinking through reading the essay, what was good, what was bad, what he corrected, and then allows you to ask questions around it. So those types of experiences are only going to help you when you actually go to write your own essay. So, and then don't be afraid to swap with your peers. And the thing about what's really great about swapping with your peers is you will get ideas from their writing. And so if you have, like, utilizing the academy and the forum, for example, to swap your essay, even if you're like, well, I don't know what I have to offer their essay, just do it. because you're going to gather ideas for your own essay. And believe me, you will find something for them that they didn't see. And maybe you can give them some advice that they thought, they didn't recognize. And so don't think what you have to offer is not valuable. You do have something valuable to offer, even if you think you're not a good writer. Just read it for context, read it for clarity. You don't have to read it for grammar. If you're like, oh, but I'm terrible at grammar, I can't proofread someone's essay. Don't do it for grammar. Do it for context, for content. Do you understand what they're passionate about? Do you know who they are a little bit more now that you've read their essay? That's the kind of feedback you can give to them if you feel like you can't correct them on grammar. So just know that you have something valuable to give. And I think it's really valuable to do a swap. And again, that's free. Just pick someone from the forum to say, hey, I'll read your essay if you read mine. Cool, let's do this. And utilize your community for that resource. I know I did that. Now, granted, I worked in the medical ICU, and I knew, was it 4 or 3? I knew 3 other girls who were applying to the same program at the same time as me. So we had the same prompt. So of course we read each other's essays. Of course we did. Why wouldn't we? We're friends. We're going to help each other out. And even if I hadn't gotten in and they got in, they would have helped me the next year try to figure out how I could get in. So we knew we had each other. We knew we had each other's backs, and we utilized that to our advantage. So make sure you're looking for opportunities like that. And if you don't know someone else who's applying, try to go to these open houses and connect with a current student. They may be nice enough to read a personal essay for you, that type of thing, or even show you theirs. But I also want to do a blanket statement. Don't copy people's essays. Do not do that. And because even though there's a lot of applications that come in, if you were to say, take an essay from a student who got in, say, the year prior, and gosh forbid you would do this, but if you were to just take it and use it and tweak it to your own a little bit, they may recognize that. They may remember that essay, especially if it was really good and unique. I highly encourage you not to do that. I'm not saying not to use an essay to get ideas. Be very, very careful around that, because again, that's not an easy way. And now that would be a mistake, that if you fess up to it, I don't know if they would overcome that, because they would probably worry about you cheating in school too. So just want to make sure I threw that out there. But I hope you guys enjoyed this episode and it gave you something to think about, and best of luck to you writing your own essay. And I hope to see you inside the Academy for fun things. The fact that we did a live essay critique, utilize the students that are in there doing critiques for you. And I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next week.